Rocking out in the USSR with Leto, a descent into the hell of war in French film To the Ends of the World, and In Safe Hands takes us through the high stakes of the adoption process. That's all coming up in this week's film show, and critic Lisa Nesselson joins me to take us through it. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, Olivia.
We're starting with a film out this week in France. Now, Leto was one of the highlights of the Cannes Film Festival this year, and its Russian title, because it is a Russian film, translates as Summer.
That's right. If you live in the West, you could be forgiven for assuming that this movie is set in the 1960s or 1970s because there was a substantial lag in how quickly rock and roll from the US and the UK made it to fans and musicians in the Soviet Union. The film, which when I saw it I had no idea is based on the lives of real people, takes place in Leningrad in the 1980s. It's shot in gorgeous black and white, and in addition to being a gloriously bittersweet and entertaining story with great music, it's an important film because its director, Kirill Serebrennikov, finished editing it while under house arrest and is currently on trial for alleged embezzlement. He's a prominent stage director as well as a filmmaker, and he was arrested while making this film. A far too frequent tactic, it seems, for silencing creative talents that rub certain ultra-conservative Russian higher-ups the wrong way, shall we say. Now, it's customary for directors of films in competition at film festivals to accompany their movies. The Cannes administration appealed to Vladimir Putin himself through the highest French diplomatic channels. Putin replied that the judicial branch is completely independent in his country, and so he would not dream of trying to interfere.
Indeed, that director was conspicuously absent from the festival, but here's a clip from his film.
Leto. Я купил себе газету. Газета есть, а пива нету. Я иду его искать. Ага. Вот лето. Сегодня в Сейшн Гленс совета. Там будет то и будет это. А не сходить ли мне туда-да-да-да-да-да-да.
Now, you mentioned that it's a true story with real-life characters. There's a love triangle there in which smuggled vinyl LPs act as a kind of aphrodisiac. I mean, music is sexy.
Yes. Well, in the 1980s under Brezhnev, young people practiced so-called interior immigration. They soaked up whatever they could experience of the outside world from within the USSR. Now, in the film, a fellow known as Mike and one Victor Soy wrote and performed music that meant the world to young Russians. It's difficult to overstate their popularity. Electronic instruments were hard to come by, and people were still listening clandestinely to the BBC and smuggling copies of Dr. Zhivago, and they died young, which, while incredibly sad, rarely works against the legacy of a rock musician.
Yeah, it becomes kind of legendary. And that musician, Victor Soy, he's been called the Russian Jim Morrison, and also a bit of a James Dean figure too.
Well, he was killed in a car crash after a concert where he had performed for 60,000 people, and he acted in a film that was viewed by 30 million people, so the comparison isn't surprising.
Yeah, and it is bizarre to see that, talking about the music, in the concert scenes, there's full police supervision going on.
Yes, well, at official concerts, the authorities demanded that audiences remain close to immobile in their seats. Politely sitting still is pretty much sums up the lunacy of totalitarian systems. You young people may partake of the decadent music imported from the West, but don't you dare tap your foot or move your head more than this much, or you're in trouble.
Yeah, well, the music is very catchy in that film.
Very, absolutely. This material is worth knowing about right down the line, and the love story is very touching. The film is not a political one per se, although it does have echoes, but persecuting the director for alleged transgressions is doubly unfortunate.
Okay, well, we're taking a look next at a fictional French film, which is set in 1945 and which captures the authentic atmosphere of former Indochina. So it's called To the Ends of the World. It's out in France this week. Now, a lot of stories have been told about the conflict in Vietnam. Are there still stories worth telling?
Absolutely. I love this movie. I stumbled out of it and was shocked to find myself on a street in contemporary France because I was convinced I was in the majestic mountains of Vietnam, probably with an opium den within shouting distance. existence, even though I know that Gaspard Ulliel, who you may have seen as Yves Saint Laurent or as the young Hannibal Lecter or in a perfume ad shot by Martin Scorsese, is safe and walking around in 2018. I was genuinely concerned for him, but then his character gets into some pretty drastic situations here. Now, the film starts with a prolonged, dreamlike shot that establishes an anxiety-provoking tone I personally found delicious. Ulliel's Robert Tassin is a gaunt French soldier who has managed to survive the real-life massacre of March 9th, 1945, in which Japanese soldiers executed every French person they could find. At least 7,000 French people were slaughtered in one day. This is not widely known. Tassin has a nemesis who works with Ho Chi Minh and intends to track him down. Along the way, he meets Gérard Depardieu, who I found magnificent in a smallish role as a sort of enigmatic writer, and our protagonist falls for a beautiful native prostitute. Now, if that sounds like a cliche, it is, but in Guillaume Niclus' hands, he makes it feel as if it's not the very first time this has happened, then maybe only the second or third.
Okay, well, in Cannes, where this film had its world premiere in May, France 24's Sonia Patricelli spoke to the film star, Gaspard Ulliel, about his experience on set in the jungle.
It was really intense, but that was part of the experience and probably one of the decisive reasons that led me to take on the part. Guillaume Niclus, the director, knows that it adds a lot of strength to the movie and to the creative process. He would actually make things hard on purpose by taking us to film locations and remote areas. I remember having to wake up very early one day. We had to walk 40 minutes to get to where we were filming. We took a very narrow path that had been prepared in advance by locals. We had to use ropes, things that we rarely get to live on a shoot.
Faire une pause, le gamin est crevé. Oh, Robert! Putain, tu fais chier. C'est sûr que tu vas aller dans ce merdier.
So do you need to know the colonial history of the region to follow the action?
No, not really. If you hate convincingly steamy sex scenes or the sight of completely naked men showering, however, this movie is not for you. If you have a soft spot for gorgeously filmed existential dilemmas, and if you suspect that the rote phrase, "thank you for your service," can't begin to cover the horror of war, then please seek this out.
Okay, I will do. Now, from two historical dramas to a more contemporary tale now. Pupille in French, or In Safe Hands in its English translation, was written and directed by Jeanne Herry. It's about how adopting a child here in France works. So tell us what you learned.
Well, I learned that the human and administrative puzzle pieces that need to fall into place to match an infant given up at birth with the best possible parents is a very interesting foundation for a movie. The long, delicate process is portrayed here with warmth and humor and an aura of absolute authenticity. It helps that Harry has a superb cast who are fun to watch, especially Sandrine Kiberlin as a child placement officer who never met a member of the jelly bean gummy bear family that she didn't like, and Gilles Lelouch is a stay-at-home dad who serves as a foster parent to kids waiting for adoption. A young woman, a 21-year-old student, shows up at a hospital about to give birth. She quite adamantly does not want to keep the baby. The French system permits one to give birth completely anonymously. The mother then has precisely 2 months to change her mind and reclaim the child. After that, the baby becomes a ward of the state. Another woman, Alice, played by Elodie Bouchez, desperately wants a baby but can't conceive one of her own.
Well, let's take a look at some of those characters in Safe Hands.
Je veux pas le garder. Je vous appelle parce qu'on va sûrement avoir un petit pupille à accueillir.
On m'a proposé de faire un accueil aujourd'hui. Je dis non, parce que je crois que j'ai envie d'arrêter.
Il a quel âge?
Il y a un jour.
Vache.
Bonjour Théo, je m'appelle Karine, je suis éducatrice spécialisée. Comme tu le sais, ta maman ne peut pas s'occuper de toi dans l'immédiat. Mais elle nous a chargés de veiller sur toi. Et nous, on est là pour ça. Pour toi.
Now, it takes a lot, really a lot of social workers and specialists, and it's nice to see a network of believable characters who are almost overwhelmingly good at their jobs. Also, counterbalancing the underrepresentation of disabled people in motion pictures, I found Alice's side job of writing and performing audio description for a Chekhov play so that blind theatergoers can completely enjoy it to be a wonderful touch in an already wonderful movie.
It looks very moving indeed. Now, we're finishing with a live element taking place here in Paris, which mixes two seemingly incompatible elements to great effect. And I'm talking about cinema and water. Sounds dangerous. That's taking place at the Rex Theatre. Can you enlighten us?
Every end of the year, there is this glorious thing where they make use of the fact that there are enormous water basins under this vintage theater. And I don't even know how you find out that you're good at this. Did you run around with a hose and a flashlight and a radio when you were a kid? But they shoot these enormous plumes of dancing water up and down on the stage. There are soap bubbles coming out into the audience. There's lasers and loud music, always in conjunction with whatever the big children's film of the end of the year is. The theater holds almost 3,000 people. Anyone could go, and it's through the first week in January. Plan your next trip to Paris around this. It's something I find absolutely grin-inducing.
Okay, an underrepresented art form, the art of water, light and cinema. Thank you very much for the tip, and thanks for joining us this week, Elisa. We'll leave you with a preview of the frenzied scenes at the Ferry des Eaux at the Rex. Remember, you can get more arts, culture and movie news on our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
Criminal, breaking, so you